All right. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for another session of NovaTech Power Hour. The topic for today's Power Hour is retrieving an event file from an SEL relay and Orion terminal server capabilities. My name is Eyal Hailamariam. I am one of the sales engineers here in NovaTech. I'll also be joined with G. Carnegie for this session of Power Hour.
Good morning, everybody.
Wanted to make sure we emphasize that we are still doing our Power Hour t-shirt giveaways. Just as our customers that are engaged in these Power Hours and asking questions and those kind of things, we will have some giveaway t-shirts available for them. So keep that in mind. The agenda for today's Power Hour session looks like the following. We will be starting with the process of retrieving an SEL full-length event report using first the SEL Client protocol, and then a few different modules that are available on the Orion to accommodate that application. One of them is Relay Data Logger. Another application we'll be using is going to be the email module. And then lastly, we'll also be using a FileMover module to move our full-length event report to a server. Other topics that we'll cover today are going to be non-transparent pass-through engineering access to SEL relays. We will also set up an Orion to be a serial port server or a terminal server using what we refer to as a pass-through module. Our first task is going to be retrieving a full-length SEL event report using FileZilla. Again, so it's basically the application that I have right now. I have a PC. I do have FileZilla on my PC. I also have an Orion that I'm connected to. And that Orion is connected to an SEL device. It's an SEL 351 device. So this first application that I will demonstrate is going to be using an FTP, actually a SFTP connection for my file transfer from the Orion to my PC. And then I'll be using FileZilla to make that transfer. So that's more of a manual process there. The Orion, you're looking at the downstream device, is going to be connected serially to an SEL 351 device. We're going to be polling that SEL device, but in addition to polling, one of the things we wanted to emphasize is that the SEL Client protocol has the ability to make a pass-through connection to that SEL device and have the user, give the user the ability to run different ASCII commands on that device for maintenance purposes. So keep that in mind, but that is going to be the first application that we will be accomplishing. The two different, one protocol that we'll be using on the Orion side of things is going to be the SEL Client protocol. So we will be configuring that. Next, we will also be using the Relay Data Logger module so that we could have the full-length event report generated by the Orion using that data logger module. So the next application is really going to be demonstrating how we could automate that process of moving the file from the Orion to a PC or an external server using the FileMover module. So we'll take a look at that. That's going to be more of a web-based configuration side there in regards to FileMover. So we'll take a look at that, but once we've obtained the long event report from that SEL device, we'll use that FileMover module to automatically move that file to an external server. So that will be the second application that we will be demonstrating today. And the third application that I'll be demonstrating is, again, still using that SEL client to pull back that long event file from that SEL 351. We will still be utilizing the Relay Data Logger to have the Orion generate that full-length event report. Next, but in this application, we will use the email module. Again, this email module will be used to will be used to send an email, have the Orion send an email out to a group of individuals or recipients with that long event report attached to that email, or it could also be in the body of that email. So that's going to be the third thing we'll demonstrate today. But in this application, I did want to make sure that the Orion does need to be connected to an email server, whether it's a corporate or isolated SCADA network, but that email server needs to be there. In this case, we are going to be using SMTP as our protocol to that email server. With that said, the rest of my demonstration is going to be more live in NCD configuration software and in the Orion web interface. So I'm going to jump from PowerPoints to NCD. So this is again our NCD software for the Orion product lines. NCD stands for NovaTech Configuration Director. We were going to start with just creating a file from scratch and from proceeding. So we're going to go to File. We're going to create a new file. The Orion that I have in front of me is going to be an Orion LX Plus. Notice that it's going to have a Nova Card 1 in there right now, so I'll make sure that's selected. Now I'm going to hit OK. As soon as I hit OK, notice the Configure tab up top. That's where we're going to start our configuration. So under Configuration, I have Orion File 1. It's kind of a generic file name. I'm going to go ahead and save that as a new file. So I'm going to go ahead and save as. We'll call it Power Hour. All right, now that I have that configuration file saved as powerhour.ncd, now I'm going to proceed on with the configuration of this. So I'm going to set up my SEL. The first thing I'm going to do in this case is going to be setting up my SEL client and making sure my SEL device is communicating to my Orion. Once we've established that connection, next we'll work on the data long event file retrieval process. So under serial ports, my Orion is currently connected to port 1. So I'm going to hit port 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and select SEL Client as my protocol. And there it is there, SEL Client. First thing I'm going to do is define the device that I'm going to be configuring. I'm going to make my window a little bit bigger. In this case here, I'm going to scroll down. I have a SEL 351, and you can see the different relay firmwares. Doesn't matter in this case, but I'll take my SEL 351-7 relay here, and I'm going to go ahead and accept changes. Notice my device has been defined. Here under description, I could give it a unique description, so I could call it breaker 1, SEL 351, for example. At this point, that's all we're going to do is just to start make sure, confirm our communication is going. I'm double check my passwords are default auto and tail. Really not much else I'm going to do. We will get back to this event section here in just a little bit after we've confirmed we were communicating. I'll hit accept for my changes. And now that I've accepted, I'm going to go to, before I move on to inputs and output configurations, I'm going to go to port. And with the baud rate, one of the options I have there is just to do an auto baud, where the Orion is going to try different auto bauds until it finds a baud rate that it likes, that it's able to communicate on. I'm going to change my port name to breaker 1 SEL 351 as well, just so I know what's configured on that port. Hit accept. Under inputs, the first thing I'm going to do is going to just map in some points, some binary points, metering points there, and then I'll also map in some fast meter discrete points. And I will come back to those event points in a minute. Now that I've done that, I'm actually going to copy this port to serial port number 2 as well. And the reason I'm going to do that is so that I'll use the second port for triggering my event. So again, I'm connecting 2 serial cables to the same SEL 351, one for communications and doing all the other things we're going to be doing today, but the second one is really going to be triggering an event on that second port, on that relay. So I'm just going to simply copy the port to port 2. When you copy a port, it's a nice tool that's available in NCD. It basically takes all the settings that you've made in the previous port and it basically mimics them. The only thing that I would do is give it a unique device name. So we'll call this breaker 1 SEL 351, and then we'll just call it events. Notice here it doesn't like duplicate device names, so it is giving me that notification. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name it breaker 1 SEL 351, same device, but in this case, I'm going to trigger my event off of there, so I'm going to call it event. And I'll do the same thing with the port tab. I'm going to change this to event as well. All right, now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and save my configuration file again. And I'm going to load this file into my Orion. So my Orion is right here. And again, I'm connected to the web interface of the Orion. Again, you can see here I'm just doing https:// the IP address, the static IP address of my Orion, which is 172.16.68.110. I'm going to go to my files page, and I'm going to drag and drop that new file into the Orion. It looks like it's locked, so I will unlock the unit. Let's logged in. I will unlock the unit now. Now that I'm connected, I'm going to drag and drop the file that I just created. Right into the Orion. So now I've actually loaded my file, and you can see the new file is starting. I could go to devices and wait for my devices to come online and make sure they're communicating. Going through the auto baud process, determine the baud rate, and then once it's got the baud rate, it's initializing its communication with the SEL device. And it'll take a second, but we'll see our polls and responses. And one thing we could do on the side is actually open up a terminal in NCD. So we could actually open up a terminal, communications terminal, online connection, and simply just create a new connection. If you haven't done this before, it's simply giving it a connection name, SSH 172.16.68.110, which is the same IP address that I was connecting to a second ago. Taking this IP address, and I'm just going to do an SSH connection, and that's all it takes. So once you have that connection established, then I could open up a terminal. I'm going to use NovaTech to log in. And one of the nice things about this terminal is I can minimize this. I could even take this out of my NCD window, and I could double check to make sure my communications, it looks like it's pulling and responding now. And I could also come here and I could double check my communications on port 1 by doing view communications, which is option 3, and then picking the port that I want to look at the communications on, which is option 1. And now I'm able to see the raw communications between the traffic between my Orion and the SEL 351 device. That is going to be the very first step of this demonstration, is really just being able to communicate to that SEL device using SEL Client protocol. Now that we have our communications established, next thing I want to do is add to our NCD configuration. So for that, we're going to go back to the NCD software. And now if we're talking about the process of configuring the Orion to retrieve a full-length event report from the SEL 351 device, there's going to be a couple of things we'll need to do on this SEL Client port side, protocol side. So the first thing that's necessary is going to be, doesn't matter which way you do it, because we'll have to do it either way. So the first thing you'll need to do is make sure you have the full-length event report points that are associated with that, to mapping those into what we're going to be pulling back. So for that, any default file that you'll see for SEL protocol, most of the time those points are going to be towards the very bottom. Those are going to be event points, event string points. So you'll see here at the very bottom of this default point map table for this SEL 351 device, you'll have an event summary string, a history string, and a long event string point. So these 3 points here, what we're going to do is the first thing you're going to have to do is map those points in to points that you're going to you want to get from the device. So these are the 3 event points that you want to pull back. Again, you can see for the long event string, it's actually running the EVE ASCII command. For history, it's running the history 12 command. So kind of keep that in mind. Orion's actually running those ASCII commands on that SEL 351 to obtain that full-length report.
Hey, yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in. Can you go to your serial port? Did you create 2 serial connections, or is it just 1 serial connection right now?
So we went ahead and created 2. So essentially, one is going to be just our communications. The other one, I'm going to use it as connected to the same SEL 351 on that secondary port on the back of that 351. I'm going to use a second port to trigger an event. So I'm going to trigger an event on that port, and we'll be able to see the full-length event report getting generated.
Okay, so just to clarify, port 1 right now is going to be pulling SCADA data as well as sending out that long event file command request, correct?
Correct. So port 1 is going to be doing all of that.
Yeah. So that's what most of the application, that's what all you will need. You don't need the second port. The second port, EOB's only created so that he can trigger an event in the background. So this is only for testing purposes. Is that correct, EOB?
Correct.
Okay. So in normal application, you don't need the second port at all. The events will happen on its own.
Yep. This is more of a testing environment, so I could, since my Orion and my SEL 351 are off the net, aren't in a real application, we're doing 2 ports to generate that event on the second port.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Device. Cool. Let me know if there's any other questions we need to address.
Okay.
And if there are any questions, please let us know, and we'll definitely do our best to answer them throughout the presentation, as well as sending out a formal question responses as well. So with that said, I'm going to go back into the NCD configuration. The last thing I did before that question was basically map my points for my long event string, history string, and event summary string into my configuration. So I've mapped those 3 points in. So that's going to be the first thing you'll want to do as it relates to generating that full-length report. The next thing you want to do in the SEL Client protocol side is going to be telling the SEL client that it wants to retrieve a full-length event report. All right, and that's going to be done right here. We're going to go back to right here under the Device tab under Breaker 1, SEL 351. So when you select that, this is kind of where we were earlier, where we defined the unique device name and the level 1, level 2 passwords. Remember this section here, this event section. This is a section where we want to make sure a few parameters are selected. So the event filter time is actually entered in seconds. A setting of 0 would actually disable the event filter, so every event is going to be reported. If multiple events occur within that event filter time, only the first event is going to be reported in that event buffer. So keep that in mind about the event filter time. Right now I have it at 0, so every event will be coming in. Event distance. So this the event distance filter is in miles, so it's going to be the location in miles that a fault is reported by the relay, and this must be less than or equal to the filter this filter in order for it to be processed as an event. All right, so the value here again, if you have 0 in here, that's going to disable that, and all events will come in. Last link, this event report, it's a little checkbox. So we're going to go ahead and make sure this, if this box is checked, event reporting is going to be enabled, and the Orion will pull for a long event report. Again, that's going to be that EVE command that we looked at a second ago after receiving a summary event. So we're going to receive the summary event first. We have that map point mapped in. After that, the long event report will be generated if we have this checked. So this is going to be very important if you are working on an application where you're trying to bring back the event report. The event retrieval delay, this is going to be in minutes. Essentially, this is how long the SEL client will wait after receiving a short event report, before it will pull for a long event. So keep that in mind. So again, when I say trigger an event on the SEL device, on the SEL 351, That's going to, after we get that event summary, that's going to happen pretty instantaneously. After we get that, and then it's going to wait 1 minute before it starts generating that full-length event report. All right. And then the last thing is going to be this file name source. This is going to set the source for the log file name for the long event report when the event report is enabled. All right, and here we have two options. We could use the port name as a reference or the FID as a reference. All right, so the only thing that we're going to have to do that's different from the default settings is really going to be checking this box. I know I kind of walked through the explanation of some of these parameters here, but keep in mind we have this checked, and then the event retrieval delay is going to be after that. The amount of time it's going to be before it starts generating that full-length event report is going to be 1 minute. Is going to be 1 minute. So keep that in mind. So that's all I've done. So now that I've done that, the next thing, that's all you'll need to have to do. Again, check this box here, make these changes, make these attribute changes if necessary, accept your changes there, and then on the SEL client side, make sure those 3 event points are mapped in. These 3 events. Again, you could do one of these, 2 of these, or all 3. But these are the 3 event string points that are available usually within the SEL default file. The next thing that we're going to do is now that we've mapped this point in and told the SEL client that we want to receive an event report for this SEL 351 when an event occurs, the next thing we're going to use is one of the modules that I mentioned earlier. It's called the data logger module. This is an add-on that's available. It's going to be found under add-ons. Under add-ons, you'll see here. And again, this tool is going to be what's going to be actually generating that text, the log file for you. So we're going to go into data logger. And the first thing you see there is under port tab. Under port, there's not much there. It just says port name data logger. The next thing there you see is add new file group. And so this is going to be where we're going to add the first file group. Essentially where we're going to be storing the file on the Orion. So it's going to be, once that file is generated, where are we storing that file? So we call it group 1, we could leave it the way it is. Default file path on the Orion, it's a Linux directories. It's a Linux operating system, so there's a number of different directories that are on it. For testing purposes, a lot of times I'll just use my temp directory, which does get cleared out on boot up, but there are other directories that can be utilized for this application. But for now, we'll use a temp directory on the Orion. So it's easy to remember. Once our files are generated, I want them to be stored in that temp directory on the Orion. Once I've defined that, I could also define that in the file name. I could say, show the timestamp, show the sequence number. I could also have an option of defining the file name. So if the file name is not checked, which isn't right now, then the name of the file is going to contain the base file name, and then it will also consist of the total logs and the log size. So for us, we'll just call it SEL 351 breaker 1 event. All right. So now that I've defined that and I've defined where I want my file to get stored once it's generated, I'm going to hit accept, and I'm going to go into the inputs tab. You'll see inputs there. Again, this is going to be the Orion real-time database here. It's basically made up of all the points that I have configured so far. I'm going to filter it again by port 1. So again, port 2 is just what I'm using for simulating the event. So for now, I'm going to go to port 1, which is what I'm using for communication. I'm going to say these 3 points here that I'm generating, that I'm reading from the SEL 351, history string, long event string point, and the event summary string point. I'm going to take those 3 points and I'm going to map them into data logger. Again, as soon as I map it in here, the Orion, it's going to tell the Orion as soon as that event is created on that SEL client side, go ahead and generate the log file for each one of these. All right, so that's what data logger is going to be used for. Now that I've done that, I could actually do our second test. I could save our configuration file, and I'll go back to our Orion, and we'll load our updated file. So we're going to go to Files, and I'm going to load the file that we just created. So I'm going to take that file, drag and drop it right into the Orion. Notice the new file is starting. And if I go to devices, we'll give it a second for it to get that communications going. Refresh our page, see our 2 devices there. Just waiting for our communications to be established fully. And I could take a look here as well as we're waiting. And I could do view communications on port 1, for example, just to see if communications is moving along. It looks like it is. And there are our polls and responses. So now that we have our polls and responses and things are moving along, now let's go ahead and try to trigger an event on port 2 and make sure that we see it, that port 1, the SEL client on port 1 actually generates that event report. So what we're going to do is I'm going to open up another terminal. So with this, I'm going to go to View Communications 3. And when I'm able to view communications on different types of ports. So I could also, the data logger that we just, the port that we just configured, like it's on port 5. So I could actually mod our traffic on that port. So if I say view communications on port 24, which is option 5, data logger. So whenever the data logger module is actually generating that file, I'm able to see it here. And I'm also, let's go ahead and open up another terminal. And then that's one of the nice things of having a SSH connection to an Orion, or if you're just connected over network, is you can have multiple instances of these connections. So here I'm viewing the traffic on data logger port, just to make sure that data logger module is actually generating my report. What I could do here is I could do a pass-through to my SEL 351. Again, I'm going to do that on port 2 so I could generate the event. And then on this window, I want to make sure that the Orion's actually generating that report. So what I could do here is I could 5 system menu. It's going to be option 5 system menu. And then it's going to be pass through menus, which is option 6. Again, this is an option that's only available with SEL Client protocol. You're able to interleave by being able to pass through by communicating to that SEL and by issuing ASCII commands down to it as well. So we're going to go to 6, pass through menu. And in this case, I'm actually going to pass through the second event port, so port 2. And it actually connects me to that SEL device. I'm going to get into level 2 so I could trigger that event. Now that I'm in level 2, as soon as I hit trigger, it's going to trigger an event on that SEL 351. And you can see here my event summary, file entry successfully written to group 1 for point event summary. So that's going to be the first file of the 3 different files. We have the history string file, and then we have the event summary string file, and then we have the long event report string file. So this is going to be one of the first of the 3. Now that we have that, we'll wait for a second for all the other files come in. In the meantime, again, after the event summary string file has been generated, after a minute after that is when it's going to start writing the long event file. So we'll give it a minute to do that. Aside from that, the next thing we're going to do is actually going to be using FileZilla. FileZilla is an FTP, SFTP server tool that could be utilized to connect to the Orion and look at the different directories of the Orion and look at the files that reside on it and so on. I do have FileZilla running already. And so with this connection, all you do to make the connection to the Orion is really define the connection. So you can see here is just an SFTP connection, / / the IP address of the Orion, which is at 1.110. The username and password on the Orion are going to be NovaTech. That's going to be what FileZilla is going to use to make that connection to that Orion. Keep in mind, just a side note, the NovaTech user does need to have permissions like SFTP or FTP, whatever you're planning on using. If that permission is not granted when you're setting up this NovaTech user, then obviously it's going to not allow it to make this connection. So kind of a little back note there. But with that, I'm going to make a quick connection to my Orion. I'm going to abort the previous connection and make a new one. And as soon as I make that connection, it's going to look like here. I'm not going to look like much, but this is what it normally shows up as when you're using FileZilla. I like to just kind of back up into a couple of directories and then get to the main. But for us, all we care about is the temp directory, so I'm going to go ahead and hit temp. And when I hit the temp directory, one of the things you'll see is that it's generated the first file, and it's got that SEL 351 breaker 1 event. And again, this is that event summary log file that is generated. So all this means right now is we've communicated to our device using SEL Client. We've generated a report. In this case, it's just an event summary report. And now that file is residing on the Orion in the temp directory. All right. And it should be, and you can see here, first it created that event summary, next it created the history string, and then it finally created a long event string. So it does that time, it needs to wait for that 1 minute to elapse. Once that elapses, it starts generating that report. That's why it took a second for it to get all those 3 files. And if I refresh this temp directory, let's go back. And I think it's still probably generating that report. That's probably why I'm not seeing it yet. Here, I could double check. If I actually go to the view communications on port 1, 3 view communications on port 1, you'll actually see the report being generated here as well. So a couple different ways to go about it to make sure things are happening as you expect them. And it looks like the report's already done. So refresh this page one more time. So that's going to be the first part of this, really generating that report and making sure that report. So we'll give it a second to finish generating that report, but we should see those other 2 reports in here as well. So going back to our, so that's going to be, so once we have those files generated, they're going to show up here. The nice thing about FileZilla is you can make that connection. You can have it on your local PC or your engineering PC. And then you could actually just simply take that file and drag and drop it right into your PC. All right, so we've moved that file, that first file, into the my desktop of my laptop. So if I look on my desktop, I'll get that event summary, and that's going to be what's shown there. All right, still waiting for that full-length report to come in. Just double check. All right, we'll give it a few minutes. We'll come back and take a look at that in a second. Aside from that, we are going to, so that particular application was really using FileZilla to obtain that file. So that's going to be using SFTP as our connection method. So the next option is being able to move that, to automate that process by using an external server and using what we call FileMover. Again, FileMover is a tool that automates that file moving process. So if I go into the web interface of my Orion, I can go to Files here, or I'm sorry, Settings, and I could go into Scheduler. So again, that FileMover module is going to be found under Scheduler, under Settings. So we're going to go to Settings, and then on the Orion LX Web UI, and then we're going to go to Scheduler. And this is going to be where I could add a task. So I could add a CSV task if, I'm trying to email the archive of the Orion or something like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a FileMover task. So this is going to be where you see that. And we're going to select on that. And we could essentially, there's not too much to this setup. It's essentially going to be defining a task description. So event file, we could just call it event file retrieval or event file, whatever, or just event file if you want. Part of this scheduler is you have this system here where you could define, what month of the year, what day of the month, what day of the week, how many, what hour of the day, and then, what minute of the day. So, I mean, I could do it at the top of the hour, every day of the week. And I could repeat this process as well. So that's going to be part of the scheduler tool there. The next thing that you will want to do is you need to define. Yeah.
You're still showing the FileZilla screen. We don't see your
Oh, thanks, G.
web page.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties here. Give me 1 second. You're seeing this right now, FileZilla?
Yeah.
What about now?
Still FileZilla.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me share my screen again. All right, how about now?
So I can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, perfect. So let's go back to the web UI. It looked like it was stuck on that FileZilla screen. How about now, G? Web interface?
Yeah.
Cool. So we're on the web interface. So let me back up a little bit. So we're just back on the web interface, and to set up the FileMover, we're going to settings. We'll go to settings on the web interface side, and we'll scroll down to the bottom and hit scheduler. So this is going to be where we're going to schedule our FileMover task. Again, you can see that here. We have a few other options of tasks that we could schedule, but in this case, we're going to use FileMover to move that event file into an external server. So we'll go to Add FileMover Task, and the first thing you do there is going to be define the FileMover task description. So we could call it event file, for example. So once you have that, the next part of this configuration, the setup, is going to be defining how often do you want to look in that temp directory and move, if there's files that exist in that temp directory, how often do you want to look there and move those files to the external server. So here you could choose on, what month, what day of the month, what day of the week, what hour, and so I could say just top of the hour of each day, and I could kind of put this on repeat if I wanted to. All right, so the next part of this configuration is going to be whether you want FTP or SFTP as the file transfer method. So again, if it's FTP, this is an unsecure connection, so you definitely want to make sure the username and password that you're using on the Orion side of things, it has FTP as a permission enabled. Or allowed, I guess I should say. SFTP is a secure connection to SFTP that's enabled by default. So again, you can definitely use either one of these options. You just want to make sure those user permissions are in line with whatever you're using here. So the next thing is going to be the path. Again, there's going to be the source where the file resides, and then the destination is going to be where you're wanting to send those files that are in that directory. Again, so the path is going to be, in our case, just a temp directory on the Orion. All right. The destination side of things, we're going to need to define the IP address of the external server. The port is standard 21 that we've normally used. You could change that if you need to. This is going to be the path of where you want to store those files on that external server. So you'll need to define that, and then the username and password are also necessary for that connection to be established. We do have an option to delete on success. So what this means is it looks in that temp directory, it sees the event files there, and at that point it's going to move those files into the external server using whatever protocols you've chosen. But then after it successfully moved those files, it has an option of deleting them off of the Orion. So delete on success. It's simply a checkbox that you need to set, and then you could save those settings. And that would be the process of actually automating that process so that FileMover is now the one moving that file for you, and you're not having to use FileZilla to automatically or to manually go in and retrieve those files. So a couple of different options there. I'm going to double check our event just to make sure. Should have been here by now. I'm going to reconnect just to make sure that all right, we got 1 out of 3. I'm not sure. I have to double check to see what I'm missing. But that was going to be the first task. So the next thing I want to do, I'll need to take a look at that again. But the next thing I want to do is, let's go back to our point slide. The next thing we want to do is actually use an email that file to. So now that we've used SEL Client to communicate and retrieve. To communicate to the SEL device, and then we've used data logger to generate the log files. The next thing I want to do in this application is use an email module, and that email module will email the file out to whoever you have defined in that group. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and set up the email module here in this case, and then we'll update the file and make sure that email comes through. With that said, let's go back to our RNCD configuration. And for that email module configuration, we're actually going to go to the configuration that we've started. We're going to go down to network. Under network, we'll have configure new port. So we'll select that. Next, we'll select email as our option for configuration. So we'll email server. Hit OK. And this is going to be, for those of you guys that haven't seen, we've actually updated the configuration window for email module. So this is kind of what it looks like now. It kind of has the same look and feel to like the new DNP, new SEL client protocol, and so on. So keep that in mind there. It's kind of been updated. Under general, this is going to be where the domain, the server name, and things of that sort are going to be defined. So you'll need to get with your IT department to make sure the email server details are correctly defined. For me, I'm going to go ahead and use an email server that I've already tested out. So let me open up this email config, and I'm going to copy in some of the settings. I'm going to minimize this window. And for my email config test that I did a few minutes ago, email server, and I'm going to actually take some of the email server parameters and put them in here. Again, this is going to be defined particularly probably by your IT department. Gmail, and I'm just using a Gmail connection email server here for this application. Just copying over the details email server. All right, one last parameter, display name, I don't think that. All right, and then the SSL verification, SSL encryption, SMTPS is being used, so we'll go ahead and make sure to use the same one there, and then we'll do verify none. So I just wanted to get that detail there. I'm going to close my email configuration. And so we're back to our configuration, but the email server details are configured here for us. So I'm going to hit accept my changes. And the next thing that you're going to do is recipients. So go to recipients, and I'm going to add in myself as a recipient. And then add in the recipient email address. All right, now that and then so if you had multiple recipients, you just keep adding. So that process is going to be pretty straightforward there. Now that you have all your recipients added in one place, the next thing you're going to want to do is add a new group. And so again, you'll have options of creating different groups. So if you wanted to have like an engineering group, I could do that, an IT group, or SCADA technicians group, or whatever the case may be. You could define these different groups and then add in the different recipients. So here I'm going to modify this group name to engineer. And so under that group, you could actually see the different recipients, the available recipients. So again, these are all the recipients that you've defined under the recipients tab. You'll see them listed here. So if I want to add EOP to, for example, to the engineering group, I could do that. if I had any other individuals, I could certainly add those as well. So now I've done that. I've added EOB to the recipients group. I could go ahead and go to inputs. And again, when I go to inputs, it's basically defining what points, which points do I want to email out when an event occurs. So for us, again, it's going to be, we could filter by port 1, for example. Again, this is the points we have coming in. Again, the metering points, the FMD points that I had. We have the confail point. But particularly, I want to make sure we email out these 3 points, which are going to be the history string, long event string, and event summary string points that we mapped in earlier. So I'm going to map those into there. You could define how you want the attachment, whether you want it in the body, or both attachment in the body, or just the attachment. So by default, it's attached, which is just fine. But you do have the ability to change that. But now that I've done that, I could go ahead and save my settings, and we could go ahead and load this configuration file back into the Orion and make sure we're getting emails. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We've saved our changes, and we're going back to the Orion. I'm going to go to Files, and then I'm going to drag and drop the file that we just created. New file is starting under Devices. It's working through. I'm going to open up those COM terminal ports again. All right. And then open up two instances so that I could view a couple different things. Here, I'll just make sure our communications is going on port 1. So here I just went to 3 view communications, and I'm going to do 1 for port 1 communications. It looks like it's moving along. Communications is moving along. Now that I'm okay on the communication side of things, I could actually go to 3 view communications on data logger, which is, again, where it's generating those files. And then on this one, I could actually do 3 view communications on the email. So I can make sure that email is sent out successfully. So I could say view communications on option 6, which is port 25 email. So now I need to trigger it. So let me open up another terminal. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to go back to NCD, open up Connect Communications, open up another terminal. And I'm going to also take this out of the window and then get rid of NCD. All right, so here we're monitoring the data logger. Here we're monitoring email. Here I'm actually going to pass through to port 2 and trigger that event. So we'll do port 6 for pass through. And then we're going to go to port 2. Let's log in and to level 2. All right, so I've triggered it here. See that data logger is seeing that file, and then an email successfully sent to this particular group. So now that I've confirmed that the data logger and then email is successfully sent, I should expect to see an email coming in here in a little bit, and then we could also actually get out of here. And and you could see the email coming in here for that event, for that data logger, event summary. And the log file will be coming in here in just a second as well after it's been generated. So we'll keep an eye on that. In the meantime, 3V communications on port 1. And so you can look at the communications, and I could also see when it starts generating that event, the full length event report. So I'm going to keep my eye on that. Chi, is there any questions in the meantime?
I've been answering them in the background.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, you can see the event text report starting. And it's actually generating that long event report. And you can see it, file entry written for history string. So that was a history string actually. Give it a second to start generating that long event report. And you can see that email just came in for the history file. And this is going to be the history text file that it's generated. And notice it ran the history 12 command to get this report to that SEL 351 device. So we'll keep an eye on this report. Now it's generating the full length event report. Give it some time to finish. So these reports, again, I don't have too much data on my SEL 351, but it's going to depend on, how many events there have happened and so on in terms of the duration of this process. All right, looks like it's finished. Event report completed. You'll see here file entry successfully written using the data logger, and also here email successfully sent for this long event string breaker SEL 351. So I should be receiving my email with the event report as an attachment as well. Giving that email a second to come in. All right, that email just came in, the email server, and this is going to be our long event string. And so you can see here, breaker 1, SEL 351, the date, the timestamp, that's all included in that event in the file name. So you can see it's a .txt file. So again, I could open this file up and kind of look at that long event report, go through it and kind of get a good amount of information about that event. So that's I'm going to double check to make sure with FileZilla before I turn it over to Chi. I want to make sure, just double check to see if our files are generated in this directory. So I feel like I'm not refreshing it the right way. All right, I need to double check into that. We got one of our files. I'm not sure why the two. Maybe I didn't map them in or something.
Is it the right directory? Yeah, just double check that.
We could double check that real quick.
If not, don't worry, we can switch to me.
Yeah, no worries. Let's see. Add-ons, data logger. So those points are there. And under group, total logs. Yeah, it's a temp directory, so I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. Maybe it's the default file name. I had the total logs at 2. But aside from that, hopefully that makes sense in terms of the process of the configuration side of things, of generating the full length event report from an SEL 351 or SEL device using SEL Client protocol. With that said, I will turn it over to Chi so that she could go through a couple different applications.
All right, let me switch so I can. All right, Eob, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see NCD.
Okay, perfect. All right, so what I want to go through is the ability for the Orion to act as a terminal server or serial port server. But before I jump into that, Eob actually did this in his demo, but he kind of went through it pretty quickly. I just want to emphasize this. Without even any additional configuration on the NCD, we're talking about the MPass, which is Master Pass Through or Slave Pass Through. I just want to let everyone know aware that there is already a built-in pass through without any additional modification for Schweitzer relay. So what I mean by that is that right now I have an Orion that's pulling a 501 using SEL protocol. Nothing is configured additionally, but again, Eob kind of mentioned on this, SEL protocol has the ability to do interleaving. So while you're pulling SCADA data using the SEL protocol, you're allowed to go into the SEL relay for remote engineering access. And so what I mean by that is that we do have a built-in capability to go from the Orion to the SEL relay for remote engineering access. And it won't interrupt SCADA. So right now, I have the Orion just calling the SEL device. And if you go to the Orion using the MMI interface, so I'm going to go connect to an LXM and just authenticate myself. And so everyone should be aware of this menu by now. But this actually, I only learned this a few months ago because I totally didn't, I barely ever use it, but someone showed it to me. So I just want to highlight it. So when you're in the menu here, if you go to option 5, system menu, there is an option called Pass Through menu. And if you select 6, it'll list all the SEL client protocol that you have configured in the current active NCD file. So when I select 1, and it'll tell you that if you press Control X 5 times, it will exit. So right now, what I'm doing is from the Orion, I am going to port 1 to my SEL 501 device, and I can send it any regular SEL command like you are used to. You can do to AC 501 and do a history if I want, and so on. So pretty much remote engineering access. As you can see in the background here too, we're not interrupting SCADA in any way. It's the interleaving that's happening right now. So, so I want to emphasize that this ability is available whenever you connect an Orion to a serial device, a Schweitzer device, and you can kind of tunnel through the Orion without any additional information, just as long as you have access to the Orion MMI interface. And so this kind of connection, let me do Control X, is what we call a non-transparent connection. So transparent is when you connect to a Schweitzer relay for remote engineering access without you as a user even realizing you're going through the Orion. It's not, that's transparent. Non-transparent, which is this, is that means you actually have to authenticate on the Orion first, then tunnel through the Orion saying, I need to go to port 1. So that's more of a non-transparent connection, and that's similar to what the old legacy SEL 2030, 2032s, where you have to go into SEL 2030, authenticate, say port 1, to go to a port 1 device. So the Orion here, by doing this, is kind of acting like a SEL 2030 or SEL 2032. All right, so just to let everyone know that's available, let's disconnect and close this. All right, so what I have here is I want to talk about terminal servers or port server. So the Orion has the ability to have pass-through connections transparently. By that, it can act as a serial port server or a terminal server. And so I'm sure everyone has heard of these terms. Some might actually not know that they actually mean the same thing. So serial port server and terminal server are, they mean the same thing. They're interchangeable depending on who you talk to. They prefer one term over the other. I see them as identical. What the idea behind terminal servers is to provide a serial device with a common connection to an IP-based network. So in other words, it allows you to convert serial communication to an IP-based communication. So now you have a serial device, either Schweitzer or non-Schweitzer, and obviously it doesn't have any Ethernet ports. You connect that serial device to a terminal server. Now that terminal server now provides an IP address and a port associated with that device. So that's what a terminal server does. Device on the network now can communicate to that serial device using an IP address. So just that you're aware, due to the end device being serial, most of the time you can connect to it on the IP network, but only one connection is limited, because at the end of the day, it is a serial connection. So only one connection is allowed to that serial device at a time. So sometimes you can try, let's say someone's already in that SEL device for remote engineering access, and someone else tries to get in, you'll see that it's already being used or you can't connect. So just so that you're aware. I say there's an exception for SEL relays is because of the interleaving, the second connection being the SCADA connection, but you can't have both remote engineering access connection. One can be a SCADA connection, one's remote engineering access on the same serial connection, but you can't have both of SCADA or both of remote engineering access. My apologies, our webinar is going to be over the time limit. If anyone needs to leave, please do so. We are going to continue. We are going to record this and post it online, so in the event that you do have to leave, you can go watch the remainder of the Power Hour at a later date. All right, terminal servers usually have RS-232 or 485 serial ports, and then usually also have Ethernet ports. So that's, you connect to a network and then out to these serial ports. Most terminal servers usually have, a large amount, can be 16, can be 24. It's really up to the hardware. So for most Orion devices, because we do have our serial ports and Ethernet ports, we can act as a terminal server. For the exception of Orion I/O, the reason being is the Orion I/O usually have one serial port only, and because the I/Os aren't usually used as a terminal server, software-wise, we don't allow it. But if we do allow it, you just connect to one serial device because there's only one serial port, but we don't recommend it. All right, so I'm going to go through some scenarios that uses our pass-through modules. So the first one is probably the most common one, is you have an Orion currently polling a Schweitzer device for SCADA, and now you want to set it up so that the Orion allows a transparent connection to the SEL relay for remote engineering access. SCADA is still going, but you don't have to authenticate on the Orion like I just did. You just can go through it without having to authenticate on the Orion. What modules you need is obviously SEL Client for the SCADA polling, and then what you'll need is a module called Pass Through Slave, or sometimes called SPass. So how we would configure that is, I actually already have, you saw configuring a Schweitzer client device. I'm not going to do that. I just have one already. You saw that's polling. So really this is a SEL client. It's communicating out of port 1 and talking 9600, pretty standard. What I want to do now is I want to create a network connection, configure new port, and in the option here, I can select pass-through server. Click OK, and we can provide a descriptive name if you want. Let's say it's going to a SEL 501. And what we can do is now what port number I want to do the pass-through. So because my SEL device is on port 1, I can say port 1, and I'm going to assign a unique TCP port to it, and I'm going to call it 2001. If you're creating multiple of these, obviously if you're on port 2, do 2002. So any server pass-through connection that you create, you need to have a unique TCP port. If you don't, it will pretty much scream at you, similar to, you're creating a DNP slave port and so on. If you are using a duplicate port, NCD will kind of yell at you and say, hey, it's duplicate. Make sure it's unique for any serial port. These you kind of have to play with. It really depends on the ASCII capability of the end device. So most SEL devices, it allows for escape IAC. If you're using SPass for SCADA, you need to uncheck that. Anyway, it's one of the things you kind of have to play with depending on the end device. So right now I'm just going to leave it as default. We're going to accept, and that's it. Pretty much right now what I'm saying is I'm assigning TCP port 2001, and I'm going to connect that to serial port 1. So I'm going to save that, and then let me send my file down. Pass-through config, open. and then send, and do a quick reboot. Let's just monitor my devices, make sure it goes online. My apologies, my 501 takes a while to get online just because it's old and serial too, so it takes a while. But while that's going, what I want to do is I'm going to use my NCD as a terminal device. So let's do communications, online connection. And what I'm going to create here is I already created, but I'm just going to show everyone. So you don't have to use NCD as your terminal connection. You can use Hyperterminal, you can use Accelerator, whatever third-party tools that has telnet capabilities, pretty much. My 501 is starting to pull. All right, so in the connection here, I want to make sure I'm using telnet. And what I do is that to connect to that serial device for remote engineering access, I have to type in the IP address of the Orion. So the IP address of the Orion, and now to go through it, I want to use port 2001. 2001's linked to port serial port 1 as we configured. Click OK, and then when I connect to it, right now, what I did is from my laptop, I transparently connect to that SEL device. So as an end user, I have no idea I'm going through Orion. The only reason I know I'm going through Orion is I have to type in the Orion's IP address and the port 2001, but I didn't have to, go through the MMI menu like before, select port 1. This is transparent, and even from my laptop or another computer or whatever, as long as you know that to use the Orion IP address in port 2001, you can get to this relay for remote engineering access. And again, you can do any commands if you want, as if you are directly connect to the Schweitzer relay. So really, for this application, you only need your SPass, your SEL client. You already had it because you're pulling data. And again, you're just interleaving using the same serial connection, connect to the SEL device for remote engineering access. As you can see, while I'm doing remote engineering access, my SCADA data is still pulling, is not interrupting in any way. Make sure to disconnect because it will close that 2001 and then allow someone to go in. If you leave it running, just be aware, it will disconnect after a certain amount of time, but you are blocking someone to getting in if they need remote engineering access. All right, so that's the first scenario. The second scenario is similarly, oh, sorry, I must have skipped one, this one. So this is similarly, but it's no longer a Schweitzer device, so non-SEL relay. And you want to configure the Orion so it allows for maintenance access. There's no polling on it. The reason being that most other protocols, such as BMP, Modbus, and so on, does not support interleaving. So most non-SEL devices will have to need a dedicated serial connection for remote engineering access. All right. So when you're creating a transparent connection through the Orion to a non-SEL device, you will need MPass protocol and SPass protocol. And so what I'm going to do is I have another Orion is my ID. I just don't have a lot of IDs at home right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to another Orion here. That Orion's connected to this Orion serially and go to its MMI interface. So that just to show you how it works. But what the MPass, so first we have to configure an MPass configuration. So MPass, or master pass-through, is usually on the serial side of the terminal server. So right now, port 2 of my Orion here is actually connected to the console port of another Orion. So I'm going to create a pass-through. So we've been switching from master to client, server to slave to server. So even though we call it MPass, it is technically called Pass Through Client now in our latest version of NCD. All right, so here you would create, I'll just call this connection to a Orion LX. And my console port on my Orion LX is 115200. Make sure the baud rate and these are all serial connection. You click accept. And that's it. That's your MPass configuration, nothing else. Then similarly, I create another SPass connection. And you've seen this before. It is an ASCII kind of command, so I'm going to keep this checked off. I'm going to select 2. And now, because I'm using serial port 2 on my Orion to connect to the other Orion, and now I'm going to call it TCP 2002. Click Save. And let me send this file down. Send. Make sure this is up. All right. So similarly, we're going to create a terminal connection. I created it, but I'm just going to show everyone what that looks like. So similarly as before, we have the IP address of the Orion. Now I'm using 2002 to go out of port 2. And I'm going to click OK, connect. And it takes a while, not a while, but a little bit of a delay to connect to my device. There you go. So now I'm actually connecting to the console of my second Orion. Again, you'll see it is kind of seamless. So if this was another ID, you'll see its interface and so on. But as you can see here, you're just connecting to, it's similar to a Schweitzer device. I'm just connecting to another device, and in this case, it's my Orion. So really, before, the SEL client is kind of acting as the MPass, so that's why we didn't have to configure an MPass. But because non-SEL devices don't support the interleaving, we had to dedicate, serial port 2 to for a certain baud rate and so on, and then SPass assigns a TCP to that serial port. All right, the last scenario is we actually sell this to a few customers. So in the event that you're in a large substation and you have, your Orion, you have your 16 serial ports, but you need more ports. And so what we provide is we sell an Orion LX Plus as a dedicated port expander. This gives you another 16 ports. And when we sell you as a port expander, it's actually at a discounted price because there's only MPass and SPass modules on it. And it literally acts as a terminal server. So really the Orion's transparently tunneling through the second Orion, which acts as a terminal server and then pulling the end devices. So really on this Orion, you have any SCADA protocol, you can use your DMP, your SEL protocol, and so on. And on your port expander, you have your MPass and SPass, and we kind of create the similar way we did before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and create a port expander configuration. So I'm going to open my port expander file. I don't think I have anything configured on it yet. No. So going through the same exercise, we're going to create port 1. That's my port expander, port 1. We're going to do pass through client. Click OK. I am connecting serially to a device, and it's going to be 9600. So this is this connection here. This is 9600. I'll call this an IAD. Let's say choose IAD. accept. And then again, we're going to create on the network side the SPass. And similarly here, we're going to say it's going to actually port out of port 1 of my port expander. This is a different device, so I'm allowed to use port 1. I'm going to turn this off because this is SCADA, and because it's not ASCII, I don't need this escape IAC command sequence. All right, click Save, Accept. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my port expander. To NovaTech. All right, I'm just going to send that file down. All right, so while that's starting, what I'm going to do is on my other configuration file that I've been working on is create a SCADA protocol. So we're going to call it a DMP3 client. So I'm pulling it through my port expander. This is cheese device. My client address is going to be, I believe, 1. Let me double check. I believe it's 1. The port now is 2001, as we just created in the SPass, and my IP address is, my port expander IP address is 1.205. Accept, add new device. This is choose device. Okay, that's good enough. That's default DMP3. I'm just going to put everything in. We got binary, analogs. All right, save. So what I'm doing right here, just to reiterate, is I'm creating a DMP client and I'm pulling it through my port expander. All right, send this file down. Device. Now I have a DMP client and it's pulling. Go to data values and inputs, and my values are online. So I am pulling this end device here through my port expander. As you can see, my port expander is just pretty much sitting there, and all it's doing is it's converting this serial connection to this IP connection. So for mostly port expander, for what I showed, you would have pretty much, if it's purely a port expander, you will have 16 of these SPass, because there's 16 or 17 serial connections on an LX class, and you will have 16 of these MPass configuration here, or client pass-through. So that's what a port expander would look like configuration, and I believe, I need to double check, but I think when we ship to you as a port expander, these are already all configured. All right, so I hope that kind of clarifies a lot of confusion. I know we have a lot of requests and questions about MPass and SPass. MPass, just remember, it's more for the serial configuration side, baud rate, and so on. SPass is when you assign a TCP port for that serial port. Alrighty, I believe that is all we have for now. Eob, any questions I can answer really quickly, or we can conclude and we can answer in a post email? Are you on mute, Eob?
Yeah. So there were a couple questions during your session, and I got a couple of them answered, but so I got a couple follow-ups, so we're good.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll provide any of the questions that was asked during the webinar in a post email as like any other Power Hour. And and if anyone has any questions, please contact me or EOP directly, and we'll be happy to help. Our usual conclusions, just a reminder, if anyone does not have access to our Power Support community, please sign up. I can approve it, your sign-on within a day. And this is where most of our webinars are posted. You can download our software from here and so on. Reminder of the booking system, bookings.novatechautomation.com. You can book myself or EOB or any of our sales engineers. Brian Geringer is our Bitronics expert. Carlos is our Spanish-speaking sales engineer. So we have many options there for you. I do want to remind everyone, this is new. You might have seen it if you've received our Tech Talks or reminders for our Power Hour registration. There will be a box that kind of looks like this, and there will be a link, and it'll take you to a very simple 4-question survey. What we want is to get your feedback on our Power Hour. Our Power Hour is approaching, I think, a 2-year anniversary, coming soon. So one, we kind of want to know if we should do more often, less often, what we can improve on, what topics you want us to cover. Please feel free to fill out this. It's all anonymous. We won't judge you, but we do want to hear your feedback, and we want to improve our Power Hour because we're going to continue doing this, and we want to make sure we cover topics that you're interested in. And slowly we're running out of topics. Obviously, we're going to do emphasis on new features and so on, but if there's certain topic that we haven't touched yet or a certain application we haven't touched yet, we would love to hear from you and provide that Power Hour based on your request. So keep an eye out for these links, and fill out the 4-question survey. All right, that being said, I myself want to thank you for attending our Power Hour today. I'm sorry we went over, but it was a lot of information to cover. We will be posting this video in about a week or so on our Power community. Thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you in about 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.